Good morning, everyone. We are here for a conflict resolution and de-escalation technique webinar today. It is December 2nd. We will be running this webinar for approximately 1 hour with about 10 to 15 minutes for questions at the end. And we'll go on to the next slide so we can show you a beautiful introduction. For every webinar we deliver, we would like to have an evaluation and get a little insight into what you felt and how you felt about the webinar. So if you can take a shot of this QR code and have it ready, we will be showing it one more time at the tail end of this webinar. And as you can see, there is a chance to win a free gift card with a value of $25 if you do participate in completing the evaluation. Next slide, please. We're going to set some intentions today. We are creating a space that is safe to exchange knowledge, where we can support each other in solidarity as we work through the complex challenge of workplace violence prevention. Next slide, please. And ActSafe is acknowledging and honored to be at a workplace, or our workplace is located on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Stolio, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam peoples. I advise you to take a look at where you're at today and see what area you're in so you can respectfully look at the history of your respective territory. Next slide. For housekeeping purposes, we're going to be having a 60-minute long webinar, about 15 minutes of Q&A at the end. You're going to be muted for the entire webinar until later on, and you can use the chat function to submit any questions, and this webinar is being recorded at this time. Thank you. Next slide. We have the wonderful Aaron here today to share his knowledge, and he has been in industry for, I would say, about a lifetime from what Aaron has told me. He is the Senior Director of Special Projects with GuardTech and is on the Board of Directors for Event Safety Alliance Canada. Prior to his retirement, he was with the Government of Canada. Aaron spent about 7 years co-managing the BC Yukon region of the Joint Learning Program, where he coordinated and facilitated workshops focused on enhancing workplace safety. Workshop topics included harassment and violence prevention, respecting the differences of people with anti-discrimination, anti-racism, and has always promoted positive mental health in the workplace. My name is Daniel Farley. I'm the Director of Industry Health and Safety with ActSafe. I started my creative career making everything from museum-grade sculptures up to bridges and everything in between. I now am a health and safety professional for the last 20 years, where I try to apply that same creativity in designing systems and training programs to support the fine folks in the arts and entertainment industry. Next slide, please. As you know, ActSafe is a nonprofit association that services the arts and entertainment industries. We've been around for about 25 years, and we service about 3,000 employers and 60,000 workers in the performing arts, live event, and motion picture, commercial, and television production industries. Next slide, please. Our vision is to create a situation or a jurisdiction where we have the healthiest and safest workplaces in the world for arts and entertainment. We do this through preventing and eliminating any workplace risks, providing awareness and training around those specific risks, and we engage all of our industry stakeholders to try to get a better understanding of your needs so that we can support you in creating those safe workplaces that we were talking about. Next slide, please. Today, our learning objectives are to describe the definition of workplace violence, and we'll look at some common prevention measures. We're going to recognize factors that affect the risk of workplace violence, and we're going to provide strategies to safely resolve conflict and de-escalate those situations with great de-escalation techniques. Next slide, please. So the agenda is going to be looking at some definitions. We'll then get into categorization, and then we'll be looking at violence prevention, and then we'll start talking about safely and effectively responding to workplace violence. And this is done through de-escalation and disengagement techniques. At the tail end of this here webinar, we'll have a Q&A period where you can submit some questions and we'll provide some answers. And with that being said, I'm going to hand it off to the wonderful Aaron. Thank you.
Thanks, Daniel. Really appreciate that. And good morning, everybody. Quite happy to be here and presenting on this topic. So when we talk about defining workplace violence, really, we're talking about things that include how it can materialize in the workplace, helps to ensure awareness and understanding, and aids us in identifying prevention strategies, as well as safe and effective response options. Workplace violence refers to the attempted or actual exercise by a person of any physical force so as to cause injury to a worker, as well as any threatening statement or behavior which gives a worker reasonable cause to believe that the worker is at risk of injury. There are 6 common behavioral categories associated with workplace violence. The behaviors we are going to discuss under each of these categories can vary greatly and may fit into more than one category. It's important to note this is not an exhaustive list. All of these behaviors can create a hostile or offensive work environment, significantly impact worker wellness and safety, result in injury, and come from external or internal sources. We will discuss the difference between external and internal sources after exploring these 6 behavioral categories. Verbal abuse consists of any verbal statement that can be reasonably expected to cause physical or psychological harm to a worker. It can include yelling, using profanity, an aggressive tone, or offensive language. Threatening or intimidation can include any act that threatens or intimidates and can reasonably be expected to cause physical or psychological harm to a worker. All of the behavioral categories mentioned can include microaggressions. Microaggressions are defined as both verbal and nonverbal actions that can reasonably be expected to insult or dismiss and communicate hostile, derogatory, or negative messages. They are often subtle, but can harm the mental and emotional well-being of workers and create a psychologically unsafe work environment. The most common example is a comment used to demean marginalized groups. For example, stating to a worker who identifies as female something to the effect of, "not bad for a girl." The last 2 behavioral categories are physical assault, which is any verbal or physical demonstration of force or intent to use physical force against a worker where the worker reasonably believes they are going to be assaulted. It can include damaging or destroying property, verbally threatening to assault us, gestures that indicate an intent to assault, such as raising a clenched fist or hand, and physical assault. Sexual harassment and sexual assault include any unwanted touching or groping, including brushing up against us, sexual comments, gestures or messages, displaying sexual materials, and persistent staring and leering that can be reasonably expected to intimidate, humiliate, offend, or cause physical or psychological harm to a worker. External sources are from perpetrators who are not employed for the purpose of performing work in the workplace. Internal sources are those perpetrators who are employed to perform work in the workplace, including through third-party employers such as contractors, service providers, and suppliers. Let's explore these sources in more detail. Coworker refers to incidents where the perpetrator is a worker employed to perform work in the workplace. In multi-employer workplaces, this can include a worker from a different employer, such as a supplier, service provider, or contractor. Invitee refers to incidents where the perpetrator is formally or informally invited into the workplace to receive a service or supply who is not employed to perform work in that workplace. This can include clients and customers. Community refers to perpetrators who have no direct relationship with the workplace or its employees and do not enter the workplace to conduct business, receive a service or supply, but still enter the premises. They may have criminal intent or intend to violate property rules. This could include a person entering the workplace for the purpose of using drugs in the bathroom or committing theft. Personal relationships refers to incidents where the perpetrator is not currently employed to perform work in the workplace, but has a personal relationship or connection with at least one victim in the workplace. This includes former employees and domestic violence situations where a partner or ex-partner may enter the workplace to engage in violence. Now that we have defined workplace violence and how it can materialize in the workplace, let's explore the legal requirements for worker protection and how everyone can work together to prevent workplace violence. Under the OHS regulation, employers have a legal responsibility to provide a workplace that is as safe as possible from the threat of violence. This requires preventative measures. The sections of the Occupational Health and Safety Regulation that address workplace violence require employers to set up procedures to eliminate or minimize the risk to all employees and instruct them on the hazards and how to safely respond to incidents of workplace violence. That being said, everyone in the workplace has a responsibility to prevent, report, and safely respond to any threat of workplace violence. There are 6 key steps in preventing workplace violence. It begins with conducting accurate and ongoing dynamic risk assessments. From these risk assessments, we build and regularly update our violence prevention plans, policies, and procedures, which include workplace safety training that everyone in the workplace participates in. These first 3 steps encompass our violence prevention program. From our violence prevention program, as well as other policies and procedures, we build both a respectful workplace and a see something, say something culture, where everyone develops an awareness and understanding of workplace violence, knows behavioral expectations, and the behaviors associated with workplace violence will not be tolerated, and feels comfortable and safe reporting any concerns or incidents without fear of reprisal. Finally, we encourage and support everyone to trust their gut. All of these steps are critical in preventing workplace violence. Let's explore each in more detail. When completing risk assessments, we need to be mindful of common risk factors that are known to increase the risk of violence. These include, but are definitely not limited to, working in an environment where we come into contact with members of the public, providing service or care, including healthcare and social services, security, regulatory or enforcement services, or dealing with civil disobedience or labor disputes, working in an environment where there is a high pressure, stress, or organizational change, no controlled access, high crime in the area, or where there is exposure to unpredictable people, working alone or in small teams, working in remote or isolated areas with limited support, including from emergency services such as police, working late at night or early in the morning when less people are around, working with valuables, including handling money, alcohol, or drugs, having inadequate security measures in place, such as door locks, video surveillance, access control procedures, security patrols, or security presence, poor lighting in areas where employees travel in and out of the workplace from their arrival location, including parkades or parking lots, or in the workplace itself, including hallways and stairwells, inadequate available support in the event of a threat of workplace violence, including security and police, other external factors such as known domestic violence situations or volatile relationships involving a worker or former employee in the workplace, and past history of incidents of workplace violence. These factors cannot predict incidents of workplace violence, but are known to increase the risk of workplace violence. Violence prevention plans, policies, and procedures need to be developed jointly by a group consisting of both employee and employer representatives who are respected and trusted in the workplace and have a comprehensive understanding of the hazards and risks in the workplace. Joint development by knowledgeable people ensures accuracy and adds both credibility and buy-in to the plan. The violence prevention plan will state the joint approach to preventing violent incidents, confirm joint employee and employer support, outline the responsibilities of everyone in the workplace, identify the nature and extent of workers' risks of injury from violence, detail the types and probability of risks of injury due to violent incidents, provide a means to document risk assessments, identify how results will be made available to workers, include written instructions detailing violence prevention procedures to be followed by everyone in the workplace, explain work environment arrangements implemented to prevent incidents of violence, provide direction to workers outlining safe response methods and procedures for reporting incidents, provide training that helps ensure violence prevention and correct response procedures are understood and followed by everyone, facilitate the maintenance of accurate records, detailed reporting, investigating, and response procedures, as well as corrective actions for incidents of workplace violence, provide for a review of actions taken in response to these incidents and an evaluation of their effectiveness, and detail the requirement for a program review a minimum of once annually, as well as following any workplace violence incident to ensure any new risks of injury from workplace violence can be quickly identified and immediately addressed in the plan. Training for everyone in the workplace should be jointly developed and delivered by a group of respected and trusted employee and employer representatives. It needs to ensure we all learn and understand the jointly developed workplace violence prevention plan and associated policies and procedures, including how we can prevent workplace violence, safely and effectively respond, and report it. It must also include the known or reasonably foreseeable risks, the measures that have been put in place to prevent and respond to these risks, such as barriers, security, video surveillance, safe walk programs, signage, etc., including worker safety protocols, such as safe walks, and response to threats protocols, such as employee protection protocols, etc. Also, how to safely and effectively respond, including de-escalation and disengagement techniques. A clearly defined reporting process that respects privacy and allows for anonymous reporting, an investigation process that involves an objective and impartial third-party investigator or an internal investigator that both employees and employers agree on, a resolution process, including possible options for resolution for both internal and external incidents, and define parameters for follow-up and program review. The training program, excuse me, the training program needs to be jointly reviewed a minimum of once annually and following any incident to ensure it is meeting the needs of everyone in the workplace. When it comes to specific training content, the safety training program needs to include familiarizing everyone with their environment so they can identify when something is out of the ordinary, the potential risks and hazards in the workplace, how to mitigate the risks and avoid the hazards whenever possible, how to immediately report anything out of the ordinary and get help, how to be alert and maintain awareness of our surroundings through situational awareness, for example, not wearing earbuds or headphones or watching our phones, etc. The importance of greeting every person and the benefits of such, knowing that with those with negative intentions often want to remain anonymous, and greeting them takes away that anonymity. And avoiding areas we are more likely to encounter someone unexpectedly when we are alone, such as stairwells or dimly lit areas. It also needs to include the importance of always having an escape plan, which requires knowing two separate escape routes from any area of the workplace, projecting confidence as a deterrent, even if we do not feel confident, by standing tall with our shoulders back, keeping our heads up, and constantly scanning our environment. Identifying natural barriers such as planters or furniture or other items in our environment we can put between ourselves and someone who is a threat to provide an added element of protection. It is critical that safety training educates everyone on established safety protocols, including but not limited to buddy systems, where we travel to and from work with a coworker, conduct work in pairs when possible, and establish regular check-ins or safety checks when this is not possible, and safe walk programs where anyone in the workplace can easily arrange for someone to go with them when moving around the premises or traveling to and from their vehicle or transit station. If on-site security is required full-time or at specific times, such as shift change times via mobile patrols, employers need to make arrangements for this, and training needs to advise everyone how to contact them or request help. The last key element to safety training involves conflict prevention and resolution training. It can assist in avoiding situations or diffusing those that could become violent. This training addresses how to be a good listener, or listening to understand rather than listening to respond, using active listening skills, avoiding having to be right, always considering others' points of view or putting ourselves in their shoes, being respectful, effectively managing our emotions, staying solution focused, and being mindful that the other person is likely expecting a fight. So don't give it to them. To find a solution, we need to learn what is important to the other person. Allow an emotional person to vent, to diffuse emotions and restore rationality, and treat everyone fairly. Find a win-win solution whenever possible that allows them to save face. Do not let their actions and treatment of us negatively impact our actions. Focus on the ultimate goal of a safe and effective resolution. Jointly developing an effective violence prevention program and regularly reviewing and updating it is a key step to establishing a respectful workplace, as it incorporates awareness and understanding, risk assessment and management, policies and procedures, and training and support. Respectful workplaces also require leading by example, or everyone in the workplace modeling respectful, fair, and inclusive behavior, promoting psychological safety, or fostering an environment where everyone feels safe to voice concerns, report incidents, and ask questions without fear of reprisal, valuing diversity and inclusion by recognizing and celebrating differences in backgrounds and perspectives to build a culture of understanding and acceptance, which reduces biases and potential conflict, and encouraging open communication by creating multiple avenues for open dialogue and feedback, such as team meetings, anonymous reporting methods, and suggestion boxes to address issues before they escalate. Guarding Minds at Work is an excellent free resource that provides an anonymous tool to assess psychological health and safety in our workplaces and guides us in taking action to ensure psychological health and safety. You can find more information on their website at www.guardingmindsatwork.ca. Again, I'll say that again. It's www.guardingmindsatwork.ca. Establishing a respectful workplace that protects both physical and psychological health and safety reduces the risk of workplace violence. Jointly developing an effective violence prevention program and establishing a respectful workplace is critical to fostering a see something, say something culture, as both of these build awareness, understanding, trust, respect, and a safety culture. Other elements to building and maintaining a see something, say something culture are ensuring accountability and implementing fair, consistent, and impartial actions for unacceptable behavior at all levels. Everyone needs to have an awareness and understanding of workplace violence. No, there is a zero tolerance policy for any behavior associated with violence in the workplace, and the violence prevention program is followed by everyone. And believe there are no negative repercussions for reporting observations. Trust and a positive workplace culture is quickly eroded and difficult to rebuild if we do not maintain a respectable workplace where zero tolerance for violence, fairness, consistency, and impartiality are guiding principles. We want to use every tool in our arsenal to prevent workplace violence. Throughout our life, we build intuition. Metaphorically speaking, this is our sixth sense, where the vast amount of information our brain receives from all sources, including our nervous system, is processed to produce a quick gut feeling that is not necessarily the product of conscious reasoning. It is driven by a survival instinct meant to keep us safe. If it does not feel right, it likely is not safe. Always err on the side of caution and trust your gut. Don't wait for workplace violence to happen to take action. It is better we take action and it turns out to be nothing than not take action and a preventable incident of workplace violence occurs. It is always our goal to prevent workplace violence. However, as we all know, this is not always possible. The severity of impact when workplace violence occurs can be significant. So it's critical we know how to safely and effectively respond to minimize the risk of injury. Past incidents of violence have identified behavioral cues that indicate an increased risk to act out violently. These include, but are not limited to, the following: a past history of violence, if known, negative changes in behavior such as frequent mood swings, social withdrawal, decline in job performance, and inability to accept constructive feedback, being argumentative, exhibiting contempt, distrust, hate, hostility, or noncompliance, exhibiting a high emotional level with anger, despair, or fear, unexplained personal injuries that may indicate self-harming behavior, being emotionally charged or exhibiting explosive outbursts, making verbal threats or exhibiting aggressive or threatening gestures or actions, exhibiting defensive body language, demonstrating any physical show of force or acting out physically, including throwing or breaking things, clenched fists and or jaw, raised voice or yelling, swearing, using an angry tone, visibly trembling or shaking in anger or fear, advancing towards us or invading our personal space, exhibiting a menacing stare, attempting to dominate or control us, or an obsession with weapons or violence. It is important to note that these are all indicators of an increased risk for violence, but they do not necessarily predict violence. These behavioral indicators are a warning sign we need to pay attention to. Situational awareness can be summarized in 5 steps. Perception involves recognizing and gathering all available cues and elements in the environment through active observation. This includes what has happened, what is happening currently, the person's current behavior, the nature of the conflict or crisis, the presence of weapons or dangerous objects, our perception of the situation, which it is important to state is different for everyone, and tactical considerations, which include availability of backup or support and escape routes. The next step is comprehension, which requires us to analyze and integrate the perceived information to understand its meaning and significance. This includes past behavior, if known, recognize patterns, body language, and behavioral cues, and underlying factors such as mental health problems. The third step is projection, where we use our perception and comprehension to predict future actions and how the incident may unfold. The fourth step is using our perception, comprehension, and projection to guide us in making proactive, informed, and timely decisions, resulting in the safest and most effective response options. The final step is taking action. Our options in any workplace violence incident are to de-escalate and disengage. Your personal safety must always be the first priority above anything else, including others' personal safety. Never attempt to de-escalate a situation where there is an imminent threat to your personal safety. Nothing is accomplished by becoming another victim. When it comes to engaging someone in a situation where there is a threat of workplace violence, only do so if there is not an imminent threat to your personal safety. Maintaining a safe distance, or what is called a reactionary gap. Ideally, this is 12 feet, or just over 3.5 meters. This may not be realistic, but do what you can to maintain this safe distance, or position yourself where an object such as a table is between you and the other person. This gives you more time to react if they become violent. People can cover a lot of distance in a very short period of time. Stay as calm as possible and project calmness through your body language and tone, even though you will likely not be calm. Monitor how they are responding to you and adjust your body language, tone, and approach to de-escalate. Manage your emotions and ensure you do not let your emotions drive your behavior. If you cannot effectively manage your emotions, just listen. Actively listening to them using active listening skills encourages them to talk and vent, diffuses their emotions, and enables you to understand what is going on, what is important to them, and how to safely resolve the situation. It also buys time to gather and analyze available information. Be empathetic. Before speaking, ask yourself, why do I feel the need to talk right now? If it can wait, do so. It is important to let them talk. When it comes time to speak, do not threaten them with consequences, argue, criticize, interrupt, or tell them what to do. Do not try to resolve the situation until their emotions are diffused. High emotions equals low rationality, which means you are unlikely to safely resolve the situation, and you may in fact escalate it. Once their emotions have been diffused, ask them for solutions. If their solutions are not realistic or could result in negative consequences, ask them what might happen if they choose that option. If necessary, offer alternative solutions, but again, do not tell them what to do. Be receptive to how they respond. If at any time de-escalation techniques do not work, the person escalates, and or you believe there's an imminent threat to your safety, find a way to safely disengage. Every situation is different, and we need to be prepared with a plan that prioritizes disengagement and escape from any area in the workplace. Always have 2 escape routes from any area in case one is blocked. Avoid getting backed into a corner or an area with no escape. Plan different excuses you may be able to use effectively to get their agreement for you to leave the area. An example is asking permission for them to go get your supervisor or a manager to get approval or involve them in resolving the situation. Be creative, think outside the box, and have multiple options that may work. If you can't find an excuse to safely leave the situation and the person is highly emotional and fixed on you, slowly back up to get to an area of safety. I personally have successfully used this in a situation where I was able to back out of my office, down a hallway, and into another office with other staff who could help. The angry and volatile person followed me without asking what I was doing or escalating. It actually shocked me that this worked quite effectively. A situation where there's an imminent threat to your safety is the only time I would suggest it is okay to lie to get yourself to a place of safety. If you cannot safely disengage, try to physically move yourself to put physical barriers, such as a desk, between you and the person. Never turn your back to the person. Slowly remove any restrictive items that may slow you down in the event you need to run, such as high heel shoes, etc. If there is a discreet way you can call for help without alerting the person, such as a panic button, use it. If it won't escalate the situation, yell, make a scene, or call for help. Using situational awareness to help us determine what is happening or the totality of circumstances is critical. If we are not safe, we need to get safe. Only once we are safe can we ask ourselves if others are safe. If others are not safe, we need to identify how we can help get them safe without putting our personal safety in jeopardy. This will likely require us to call emergency services for help. We want to do this at the earliest opportunity, but not before we ensure we are safe. The safe response checklist steers us away from engaging others and attempting to de-escalate them when there is an imminent threat to personal safety. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you for that, Aaron. We really appreciate you sharing some of your knowledge with us. I'm going to go over here and check out the questions to see if we have any good questions coming from our audience. Audience, feel free to pop a couple in there if you have any curiosities. And it looks like our first question, Aaron, is how do you feel the risk of violence has evolved over the last 10 years or so? What's different between now and, say, 2015
That's
from your perspective?
a great question, and I think I need to, before answering it, just say this is more a personal opinion based on experience rather than I can't state it's factual. But certainly my feeling is that life has become a little more stressful. I definitely feel like there are more people experiencing mental health problems, injuries, and when we're not at our best, we're more likely to react strongly to things, sometimes overreact to things. So I would say, kind of taking all of that into account, that I'd say I feel like there's more volatile situations out there. That being said, I think the risk of violence has always been there, and those situations have always been there. We just, might be my perception that I see more volatile situations than I did in the past.
Thanks, sir. That's insightful. I do feel like environmental pressures as well, such as inflation and all these wonderful things that we're juggling nowadays, add to the stresses of people, which also kind of increase that volatility.
For sure.
Thanks, Aaron. Appreciate that. All right. Question number two. Out of all the de-escalation techniques you provided today, could you highlight one that you think is the most important or effective?
Yeah, I'd say um, taking some training and practicing active listening skills. So that's, emotion labeling, paraphrasing, summarizing. There's 8 different active listening skills. And they are a perishable skill in that even if you learn them and you don't practice them, they tend to go away. So getting familiar with them and using them in any situation, because if you are truly actively listening to somebody, and that's where I come back to that, you're listening to understand versus listening to respond, then you're much more likely to be able to successfully de-escalate a situation.
Sorry, what'd you say?
You're
Just
much
kidding.
more.
It was active listening joke. My apologies.
All right, nice.
Thank you, Aaron. Aaron, when you're thinking about situational awareness, and dynamic risk assessments, what do you think the average front of house staff should have in mind when they're kind of trying to use those skill sets?
Just maintaining an awareness of your surroundings, and I mean like a complete awareness. I find when something happens, it's not uncommon to kind of get tunnel vision and focused in on what's happening in that particular space. When there could that could be a distraction for something else, or there just could be other things going on around us that we need to be aware of. So I think just really maintaining that awareness of the entire space around us.
Thank you, Aaron. All right. It actually looks like we have limited questions. And so just browse this for one more second. My apologies. Yeah, it looks like we hit all the questions that we have so far. And so we will go on to the next slide, please. If there are any additional questions, feel free to pop them in there and we might be able to jump to them as we're going through the tail end of this webinar. So, as a reminder, there is a $25 e-gift card up for the individuals who fill out our webinar evaluation. These webinar evaluations do provide value to our team in the sense that we get to refine our webinars and our approach. So I'm going to stop on this slide for a few minutes to give everybody a chance to use their phones and hit that QR code. And in the interim, I'm going to ask Aaron another question. Aaron, your specialty comes from the live event sector. In the live event sector, can you provide a couple areas that you know the risk of violence is increased? That could be like environmental settings or, a specific conflict with intoxicated individuals. Can you give us a little insight into your experience regarding
That's a tough one because I think it really depends on it's not necessarily the event type, i.e. a concert or theater or whatever. I really think it comes down to your demographic with certain demographics that, it may be you may see more incidents of violence, but yeah, that's a tough one to answer. I can't state anything specifically.
No worries. Thank you, Aaron. We do have a question here. Can Aaron talk a bit more about the weight principle?
Yes. Why am I talking now? So, yeah, just kind of elaborating on that, I find that quite often, I think this is human nature for many of us, is when we're engaged in any kind of interaction with somebody, we have a tendency to listen until we hear something that we want to respond to, and then we stop listening and we wait for our opportunity to respond. And by employing that wait principle, which is asking ourselves that question, why do I feel the need to talk right now? It kind of causes us to pause and hopefully get back to that. Am I really listening to this person to understand, what they're trying to tell me, whatever the issue might be, especially if we're dealing with a volatile situation. So it's really a pause, a personal pause for ourselves to really get us our attention focused back on that other person.
Thank you, Aaron. We do have a request here. Could Aaron please list some of the active listening skills that you recommend? So can you provide a little more context regarding active listening to our audience here?
Sure. So emotion labeling would be where you're reflecting back to the person, just a statement, that whatever emotion is that they're communicating to us. Um, Paraphrasing would be in our own words, kind of summarizing what they've just said to us, but kind of throughout that dialogue with them where they're speaking to us versus summarizing that would come at the end where we're kind of summarizing the key points of everything they've just said to us. Um, there's lots, and I want to preface this like it really does take some training to get familiar with and practice and become comfortable using active listening skills, and that was certainly something that was discussed about on this webinar. Do we dive more into the active listening skills? And 1 hour is not a lot of time to really get into the depth of, again, learning and practicing and becoming comfortable with active listening skills. So I
Mhm.
really would encourage everybody that is attending right now to do some homework there in terms of researching active listening skills if you're not familiar with them. And like I said, there's 8 different ones. So I challenge you to find all 8 and get familiar with them.
Thanks, Aaron. And we do have a follow-up question. Do you know a good place to learn any of these concepts? So maybe resources or.
So I'll tell you where I learned was actually in university in an interpersonal, it was actually an interviewing techniques course that I took as part of the criminal justice program at the University of the Fraser Valley. But I would say any interpersonal communications courses. So beyond that, no, I want to kind of have people kind of go out there and see what's available and what fits is the best fit for them.
Looks like we might have a follow-up webinar topic. Lots of interest there.
For sure.
All right. We do have another question that I'll be able to answer. So the next question is, does ActSafe have any violence prevention resources customized to our industry? And so if we can go to the next slide, I will provide a bit of an oversight there.
Oh, just give me 1 second here. There we go.
All right. So ActSafe has developed a customizable violence prevention toolkit. The risk of violence has increased over the last 10 years. This is demonstrated through WorkSafe BC data as well as criminal data across the map as far as Canada goes. Because that risk of violence has been evolving over the last 10 years or so, it's increased quite a bit. And so we tried to brush up on the toolkit that we can provide industry. So this toolkit is customized for for the performing arts, live event, and festival industries. It exists or consists of a program component, which are policies and procedures related to violence prevention. There is a risk assessment document, which is a 7-step process that will allow you to kind of assess your current violence prevention program and look at different environmental factors around your workplace, such as CCTV or lighting and various other kind of risk factors that will help you determine the level of violence or workplace violence at your workplace and look at kind of the controls that are existing as well as additional controls that can be put into place to further mitigate the risk of violence. The toolkit also includes a Joint Occupational Health and Safety Committee primer, which is a good way to engage your health and safety committee to ensure they're looking at this risk driver of workplace violence, and it helps build your defensive due diligence and ensures you have worker involvement regarding your violence prevention program. There are also a couple toolbox talks which you can use to deliver to your crew so that they can get brushed up on the violence prevention program throughout the year. And we also have some visual reminders and inspection components. So as you can see here with the toolkit, there are various components that are part of what we call your internal responsibility system. So like how you manage workplace risks. And inspections are one way to definitely strengthen your due diligence and look out for those controls that may not be maintained or might not be working as effectively as you hoped. It can also give you a little insight into our staff actually conducting work in the manner that you expect them to regarding safe work procedures and de-escalation techniques. This here webinar is intended to complement our violence prevention toolkit by providing de-escalation and disengagement techniques, as well as some conflict resolution. And Aaron definitely touched on some active listening skills, which I think we're going to be digging into deeper because there's a lot of interest over here. Other than that, we have a code of conduct. So it is important to set the expectations for your patrons as well as for your staff so that you can ensure that people are actually behaving in accordance with that code of conduct. And in the event that things are not being done in the as per the code of conduct, there are some sort of consequences so that you can essentially make sure people are behaving as you expect them to at your workplace. Now, this here toolkit is actually for a fixed facility, which would be, say, a venue. And ActSafe has also developed a toolkit specific to the motion picture industry, which includes a risk assessment for on-location shots. So when we deal with the public, it seems that we have a higher likelihood of violence. So obviously in the performing arts and live event setting, that's basically every time that you're doing work. In the motion picture, television, and commercial production industry, typically in the studio, you wouldn't be dealing with public. And so we do see an increased risk of violence when you do on-location shots. And so the On-location risk assessment will provide you with a bit of guidance on how to conduct an on-location risk assessment for violence, and we will have a toolbox talk available to you as well to support workers in those settings so that they properly understand how to report violence incidents and how things are actually managed here at the workplace. As far as next steps go, we will be providing you with a email that has this webinar on it. We won't provide the actual slide deck itself, but the webinar is available to you. And we also have the violence prevention toolkit. So a link to those resources will also be provided. They will be published in a couple weeks here. They're just being finalized, and those are the next steps. I'm just going to check over here to see if we have any additional questions. And if you want to fill up the airspace, Aaron, give me 1 second, my friend.
Sounds great.
Right. We have, oh, we have a note about the criminal code. So to add to that, the criminal code, lawmakers intentionally combine both ideas under one offense, assaults. Okay, so we got a bit of chatting actually going on here, and we're talking about criminal code. So violence is a challenging thing to deal with because there are multiple pieces of legislation that deal with them. We have the occupational health and safety regulation, which are directed towards workplace violence and the things that employers have to do to essentially mitigate that risk of violence. It is considered a performance-based regulation, so the regulator doesn't tell you exactly what to do. They tell you what the goal is. And so the complexity of your violence prevention program will be dependent on the complexity of the risk at the workplace. So if you have a smaller workplace with limited interaction with the public, you might have a pretty small violence prevention program. Whereas if you're at a live event, Aaron, what do you normally see on a live event side of things as far as their violence prevention program?
Yeah, it'd be pretty comprehensive. Um, Briefings, training exercises, and documentation around um, planning, preparation, response, and recovery, which would also address incidents that involve violence or the threat of violence.
Mhm. And the incident investigation component to a violence prevention program is critical as well. Um, as far as creating a psychologically healthy and safe workplace, if a worker feels under the threat of violence without support, there's damages that occur. So essentially, the hardware in our brains that process physical pain or this is the same hardware that focus or processes a lack of social support. So in a situation where a violent incident unfolds at work, we conduct an investigation. And one of the legal obligations you have, which is prescriptive, is if a worker has adverse symptoms due to that violent incident, they need to be advised to consult a physician so that they can get the appropriate care thereafter. Aaron, do you have anything to complement that statement?
I think just adding that, if anybody experiences a psychological or a mental health injury at work, even before going, like obviously there's the claims process with WorkSafe that runs its course, but I want to make sure people are aware that there is a critical incident team that is separate from the claims process with WorkSafe that can provide immediate support even if the claim hasn't been approved yet, is going through the process. So that's great when somebody's been quite impacted by something that's happened, and really there's an immediate need for support, and I mean professional support.
Mhm. Thank you, Aaron. Um, you mentioned empathy as part of de-escalation. Do you have any advice on how people can strengthen or exercise empathy?
Yeah, that can be depending on the circumstances. I think it's trying to put yourself in the other person's shoes, and even if you don't agree with what's going on and you're affected by their behavior, which is understandable in a situation like this, trying to not take things personally, even though it's going to feel very personal, and just try and gain some understanding around where they're coming from. Like, where is this anger, this aggression, this volatility coming from? And I just describe it as kind of peeling back the layers of an onion. Often what we see is on the surface, but there's a lot going on underneath. So what can we do to kind of peel back those layers and get down to what's going on? Because if we can understand more what's driving the behavior, we're probably again going to be more successful in being empathetic and understanding, and also just successfully um, de-escalating the situation.
Thank you, Aaron. Um, Aaron, can you give a little insight into how body language can actually escalate a potentially violent situation?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say it's more an indicator to us, but yeah, I think what's really important is we are paying attention to how the person's responding to us. We may have all the intentions, all these great intentions, and we're doing our best to de-escalate. But if a person's reacting negatively to us, it could be something in our body language. And this is where self-awareness is really important, like really knowing ourselves and what kind of our Achilles heel is, in other words, those things that push our buttons, but also, are you one of those people that shows everything on your face? Like what you're feeling shows on your face. It's really important to be aware of that, because that's where, again, body language, our own body language could potentially escalate a situation. So a lot of us may think we're very self-aware and aware of those things within ourselves. We need to do as much as we can to ensure that we truly do know, and that we're very aware of how that person is responding to us, and adjusting everything, our body language, our tone, um, everything we are doing to interact with that person verbally and non-verbally, that it is they're responding positively to it.
Mhm. Thank you, Aaron. We do have a question here. We have, how do we contact the critical incident response team when emergency occurs?
WorkSafe BC website.
Yeah, that's correct. So yeah, WorkSafe BC is the only regulator in Canada that has a critical incident response team. In the event that you had an incident that occurred at the workplace, a violent incident, you can contact WorkSafe BC to get that information so that you can provide it to the respective worker that dealt with the situation. If you just simply type in critical incident response on their landing page, it'll take you to a series of tools that explains the program itself. All right.
And I'll just say this much, Daniel, as someone who has used that critical incident team, has accessed that resource, they are fantastic.
Yeah, I'll echo that. I responded to a number of fatalities and serious injuries throughout the course of my career, and they are trained psychologists that provide support to individuals that have dealt with a traumatic incident at the workplace. So it is a very, very important role that those fine people fill, and I've leaned on them a number of times and watched them help a lot of people throughout my career. All right. Well, we are at 11:58. So, Aaron, do you have any final words you'd like to say regarding the risk of violence at the workplace and how to mitigate it?
Just do what you can. Like, this is where, like hopefully your occupational health and safety committees are looking at psychological health and safety, not just physical health and safety, and having those discussions about, you know, those risk assessments, who's involved, reviewing the violence prevention plans, protocols, procedures that are in place, making sure that those risks that are known or that are predictable or reasonably foreseeable are addressed in the plan, and that we're doing what we can to educate everybody in the workplace around it. It's really important.
Thank you, Aaron. Throughout the course of my career, I've analyzed a lot of violent incidents that have occurred at the workplace. And just to provide a little support to everybody out there, the places where things typically fall down are assessing the tasks that actually increase the risk of violence. So that would be something like money handling or handling expensive equipment. So when you're conducting a risk assessment, you're looking at your environmental conditions, you're thinking about the past behavior and the past incidents in industry. And one piece that's commonly missed is like actually looking at the tasks workers are conducting and verifying whether those tasks have an increased risk of violence. So security, for example, would be a work a job that does have an increased risk of violence when you are de-escalating, and they're provided specialized training to be able to utilize those skills. Um, Another place where things commonly fall down are around supervision. So actually monitoring the controls that are put into place and making sure that the people conducting those tasks are doing it as per the procedures that have been developed to minimize the risk. And we'll go on to the next slide. These are two of our wonderful safety advisors, Kaylee and Marette. They are available to answer some questions regarding violence prevention, as is myself. And we can support employers and workplaces with setting up the violence prevention toolkit. We'll go on to the next slide. And here's some wonderful contact information. So please do get in touch with us. If you have any additional questions that weren't answered at this webinar, send them on in to us, and we will do our best to answer those questions and provide support to the arts and entertainment industries in BC so that we can achieve the mandate of having the safest arts and entertainment industries in the world. Aaron, applause to you, man. Thank you for all your hard work. We appreciate you. Have a
Thank you.
great day, my friend.
You too.
All right.